footsteps of my King.
All right, I've got a really cool podcast today. Hope you enjoy it. The title of this is going to be different, but the YouTube video I'm commenting on 5 things Paul Saladino changed his mind about after quitting carnivore. And Thomas DeLauer is interviewing him. Both these guys I really enjoy following. They're not, that I can tell Christians, but the information is really good. And I'm hoping at some point that they see, the need for God in the equation. Peter Attia is another one. I know he's changed his view on a few things. And it's really good to, and I love what I appreciate, I guess I should say, is these guys are honest. They recognize that, hey, we might have missed something here. And they're willing to go back and really look at the data, look at how their lives have been changed or impacted. I know this gentleman, Paul, recently stopped, not recently, I guess it was a while back now, stopped the carnivore diet. And the carnivore diet is just like it sounds. You just eat meat basically all day long. Justin Peters has good things to say about it. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I have before when I teach on health. But what I have to look at this whole issue from a biblical perspective. What's the Bible say? So that's why I can't endorse a lot of these fad diets. We were not designed to eat meat only. We're actually designed. See, that's why a lot of these guys, they start talking about evolution. There's no way a single cell amoeba or whatever it's called developed into a human and then let alone a male and then alone a female and then all these birds and species and animals all just kind of evolved on their own. I mean, it's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. But, they have to maintain a level of not professionalism, but the look of professionalism or academia. And it's really smart to say you believe in evolution. And actually, if you think about it, it's not. Well, I'm not going to get into those waters, but anyway, so how these people change their view, change their mind. It's very interesting. And he actually changed his mind on something that I have a passion about as well. It's called fasting. Fasting. And if you have questions about fasting, make sure to download my book for free, Feasting and Fasting, What Works, What Doesn't, and Why. It's at the church website, westsidechristianfellowship.org for a free download. Of course, you can get it on all the other platforms, but those will not be free. So let me see if I can cue this up. I want you to kind of hear a little bit of his thoughts on fasting. And I'm going to try to chime in here when I can. So let's see if this volume, if I can get this up a little bit. It's pretty interesting. So he's talking about 5 things. Paul Saladino he's a medical doctor, very knowledgeable. Both these guys are way more knowledgeable than me. I'm just hoping to add some biblical insight as well. He's changed his mind on 5 different things. Peter Attia did a video like this recently as well. And these guys are just a wealth of knowledge for me. And so what I do is I take the information and then I look through it through a biblical lens. And the reason I think health and fitness are so important is because the physical affects the spiritual. When I'm self-disciplined in taking care of this enormous gift that God has given me, same with you, when I'm disciplined in that and stewarding it well, that flows into all areas of life. But if I just give in to sugar and coffee all the time and alcohol and whatever, processed foods, I just feel terrible. I feel, I'm 40 pounds overweight and it's just, I'm not productive. I don't preach well. I preach really well on an empty stomach in a fasted state, but that can become a form of legalism, of bondage as well. And so that's what I'm hoping to talk about. So let's hear what he has to say. This is the 3rd thing he would change his mind about, and it's going to be on fasting. This is interesting. Let's check this out.
What would you say the 3rd thing that you've...
Fasting, probably.
Yeah.
Which is linked. So the literature around fasting and around sort of autophagy is not as clear as I once thought it was. It's kind of murky. And I'm just not convinced, number one, that you need to fast to have autophagy. If you look at markers of autophagy, our body is always kind of doing this. Our body is always using ubiquitinization of proteins and recycling them. And there's some evidence that you're doing just as much autophagy when you're eating as when you're not.
Okay. this is the one part I would disagree with. Here's why. For those of you who don't know, autophagy really the word became famous, I think, around 2017, 18. Somebody won a Nobel Prize. Autophagy basically means consuming self. And what your body does is it goes, when it's in a fasted mode, fasted state, it no longer has the glycogen, the glucose, for fuel. Or it does, it's still stored in the liver and the muscle. But then this autophagy takes place. Think of Pac-Man. Going and seeking out the dead and decaying tissue, things, parts of the cell, inside the cell. Inside the cell membrane is so complex, from the mitochondria to the ATP where energy is made, to many other things inside the cell, and it begins to clean out the cell. Sometimes the cell even destroys itself on something called apoptosis, cell suicide, and it knows its time is up, and it self-destructs. That's different than autophagy. So anyway, what he's saying is, when he talks about markers or biomarkers, there's ways where you can, through extensive, if you do DEXA scan or blood work or really glucose tolerance testing, you can get really deep into this topic. And I try to stay, on the surface here. But, which he's right, because even when you're eating, even when you're not fasting, your body is in a somewhat state of autophagy from time to time. And to me, that's no surprise, because again, that's where I wish these guys would just get on the same page, where there's a creator who created you. Then a lot of this is going to make sense. So yes, God designed us to where a certain degrees of autophagy are taking place, even as I'm possibly filming this, where the body's saying, okay, I got to get rid of this. I got to get rid of this. And so that's what he's saying. There are measures, there are markers to show that autophagy is taking place, even when we don't fast. However, if it didn't, we would die at a very young age. Here we've got this toxins, this diseased tissue, these cells that are possibly going to be cancerous. And so the body, autophagy, begins to break those down. As we get older, that ability to clean out our body gets harder and harder and harder. We could get into the whole inflammation, rogue cells, stem cells, growth hormone depletion, testosterone depletion, and hormonal imbalance. And that plays a role as we get older. So yes, autophagy is still taking place, but that wouldn't be a reason why I would say, well, we really don't need to fast. It's already taking place. No, but here's what happens. When you fast, it's autophagy on steroids. When you fast, it increases, and I don't know exactly the numbers, Walter Longo here, down lower part, down, we call it down the hill. It's about an hour away at USC. He's a professor of longevity. Really good information. Wish, again, these guys would look through a lens of creation. A lot of this would make more sense. When autophagy is taking place, I think it starts around 16 hours after not eating anything. And if you get deep, Alan Goldhammer has a lot of good information on this at his fasting clinic. Of course, Buchenheimer fasting clinic in Germany, a lot of good information, where Alan Goldhammer is water only. Buchenheimer is about 250 calories, carbohydrates, mainly juice and soup. And often the fat can burn in the oven of a little bit of glycogen there. It gets a little complicated. Daniel Pompa, who's a good friend of mine, good research on this. Ben Greenfield, a friend of mine as well. A lot of good information on this. So autophagy, what he's saying is absolutely true. But for me, it's not a reason to not fast, because when I fast, it kicks autophagy. It's like basically, let's say you're driving along, you're your children are crossing the road. You're driving along, at 15 miles an hour. That's autophagy when you're eating and not fasting. Now, when you can get on I forget that highway in Germany where you can hit 100 miles an hour, that's autophagy in a state of fasting, in a fasted state. But then it does get technical. That's why I mentioned you can download my book, Feasting and Fasting, for more information, because, okay, after, what's the sweet spot? 72 hours. And then you get into maybe a week of fasting. And then, anytime you do that, there is something that can happen, gluconeogenesis, where your body can actually create glucose from nothing, and your muscle can be broken down. The amino acids in your body can be broken down for fuel. And so you do lose some muscle, I believe, as the body's adjusting. Fat is the primary fuel, but then your body will go into protein sparing mode. It will actually spare your muscle as it begins to go into deep autophagy and using fat for fuel, ketosis, ketogenic. And that's why, again, the lens of a creator. Oh, this makes perfect sense. It's not so confusing. So let's pick this up again.
And there are some things that can trigger autophagy or autophagy signals that you're eating, like glucose or trehalose, which is a sugar that occurs in plant foods. Like that apparently triggers autophagy. That's including something in your diet. So eating glucose triggers autophagy. This is not the traditional, canonical narrative we hear. So to make it this simple narrative, like you must fast to do house cleaning, that sounds very appealing to people. And they're thinking, yes, I just have to fast more and more. I want a clean house. I go home into my house. I'm reading like Marie Kondo. I have to put everything in its place. I want a very clean house. Marie Kondo, like the life-changing magic of tidying up. So that's what they think about their body when they're fasting. And it's just not that way at all. And there's some evidence that potentially fasting could induce negative cardiac remodeling.
Whew. Could camp out here for a while, but I will spare you. Some good points, and here's why I want to do a video too is, yes, you can get too extreme about fasting. Fasting can turn into a form of an eating disorder. And, of course, as a person who fasts and teaches on fasting and loves fasting, I've got to find that balance. I've went, how many months now? 3 or 4 months. I might go another month or two without any fasting, really, just to get, a little break. But I think, fasting is, the Bragg Institute, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, great book on that. There's other great books on fasting that talk about how it is a cleaning process. And so I wouldn't say that, because I think people, number one, we need to stick with a good God-given diet based on, what he has given us as food to fuel the body and to keep our body, with berries, antioxidants. What antioxidants are doing, they give the free radicals something they need in order to stop down oxidative stress and things like that. And so it's very important to eat God-given food. And so if a person's eating God-given food, I think throwing in a fasting day is really good. A good idea sometimes maybe. And again, it depends. If you're trying to lose, when I was 240 pounds and my goal weight's 185, right now I'm still, 215 and I feel pretty good at it, but I want to go down just as I get older. Lean is the key. Trust me, as you get older. Maybe I'll have a talk with Dwayne Johnson one of these days about that. Anyway, all kidding aside, fasting for me is so important. And I think it should be an important part of your life. Now, what he's saying though is if we put too much weight in the fasting, and what he's talking about, let me see where he goes with this, but yes, the negative benefits of fasting, there are. What happens is when you fast, you've heard that term metabolic rate, your metabolism. What it does is it adjusts, and so your body by a designer has been so well oiled and fine tuned that it can see, okay, I'm not getting as much calories as I used to. So I have to lower my metabolism, lower my metabolic rate. And that's by design. Back then it was very important. Thousands of years ago, 500 years ago, even 150 years ago. But now, that's not as important because we just eat too much. And I wish the metabolic rate would stay high. So when you start to take, okay, I'm going to take 500 calories off every day. That's, 3,500 calories for a week, close to a pound of body fat. Now there's different things that happen at the cellular level. I don't know if you'll lose exactly a pound of body fat, but if you keep doing that, your body's going to go, okay, I'm not getting as much energy. So your metabolism is going to slow down. So when you start eating normally again, you might gain that weight back because you're now at a slower metabolic rate. And we're only talking 100 extra calories a day over the course of time can really, really add up. So there are ways, that's a future. You can download my books. But increasing metabolic rate, there's a lot of things, great sleep, good God-given food. Some would say eating, 3 meals a day because it keeps the metabolic rate up from digesting food. I'm not real sold on that. Exercising, of course, HIIT training, high intensity interval training. But it depends on your age, your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? So if I were him and Thomas, I probably wouldn't be fasting as much. They're already really lean. And so that plays a role in it. So what he's talking about is The downside of fasting is it can really, it can slow your metabolic rate. So you got to be careful. Refeeding syndrome, what that can do. Also, it can tap into muscle. Hard work for muscle can be utilized as fuel, with fasting. And, let's see where he goes here though with the other aspect of the I don't know if he's talking about, the cardiovascular system or what.
Or lead to fatty infiltration in cardiac tissue. So it's just, fasting is not as benign as people believe it to be, in my opinion, and people get super freaking triggered when we're talking about this. So I know the comments are going to be out of control, but I don't fast anymore. And I don't think that it should be taken as a completely benign intervention. I mean, it was all the rage 4 or 5 years ago. And I was doing carnivore, I was doing intermittent fasting. And I just think that's not how I think about it today. I think that there's benefit to giving your body signals of abundance. And we can talk about cancer more if you want or wherever, but I think that there's interesting evidence that sometimes doing too much autophagy is almost leading you toward cancerous pathways. And
it's too much of it's a constant give and take. I like the way that Mark Sisson actually put it. He was like, I don't even like the word fasting. He's like, I like fractal eating. He's like, I go through periods where sometimes I don't eat, but it's not like I'm consciously thinking about it.
All right, let's stop here. As far as fasting can lead to, or promote cancer as well. I don't know where he's getting that information from. I'd have to see, delve in a little bit deeper. But obviously, there's no cure for anything. There's no bulletproof. Let me do this, and this is going to work for sure. It's just, we do what best we can. And I think he mentioned abundance. Well, how much is of abundance? Because right now in America, we have too much abundance. So I would also challenge him on that as well. In other words, let's say overconsumption, especially of bad food, and the cause of cancer, the carcinogens, far outweigh, I don't know if I have my scale with me, but far outweigh the possible negative effects of fasting. But we also have to remember that biblically speaking, even on creation, the way God created us, you can see that we are to go through seasons of fasting. That's why we store fat. It's reserved energy. You can see in the Bible when Jesus said, when you pray, when you give, when you fast, and the disciples would fast. The Didacte would talk about fasting. The Old Testament, of course, was fasting. The New Testament, in prayer and fasting. And so there's a lot of biblical support. What we don't know is, how long, how often. You can look and see that, the Jews would fast sometimes twice a week. But then again, you don't want to get on that legalistic, kind of, I got to do this. I got to follow these rules. Fasting, and then you open a whole new debate. Fasting for physical benefits or fasting for spiritual benefits. Then everything he said and what I'm saying, you got to throw out the window when it comes to the spiritual benefits of fasting. That's a whole nother podcast because that outweighs the physical benefits. But here's a good thing. When you fast spiritually, the physical benefits are incredible. And I think it's okay for Christians to fast for physical reasons as well. Maybe not when they're doing a spiritual fast, but say, Lord, I'm 40 pounds overweight. I need to take control of this. It's got control of me. And they can really do a lot of good things through fasting. I mean, the research on this is to me, undisputable. All the people I just mentioned earlier, all the podcasts on fasting, it's really good. But I don't blame Paul, here's Saladino or Thomas, because again, if you look like they look and you're in that type of shape, you might not want to fast. And that's what Peter Attia, why he stopped kind of fasting, is because he was already lean and he's probably losing more muscle mass than he wanted to. And so from his perspective, I totally agree with him. And if I were him, I'd probably say, I don't fast much anymore. I mean, look at me. I'm already, he's 165 pounds, 8% body fat, yeah, I wouldn't fast either for physical reasons. But what about spiritual reasons? So, just to sum it up, give it to God. Don't turn it into a work. Don't become obsessed with it. What I do is I use it as a tool. Okay, I'm going to go into a season of fasting. I don't want to drive my family crazy. I want to make sure my wife's on the same page. So I don't even talk about it for a while. Or if God's calling me to that, or if there's a big decision coming up, or we're trying to get some prayers answered. I think for me personally, fasting should be part of the Christian's arsenal. on a monthly basis, whatever that looks like. Maybe, hey, I'm just going to take Friday and not eat, just water and seek the heart of God. And then I'm sure a lot of you have questions, and many of those questions should be answered in my book on fasting, feasting and fasting, what works, what doesn't, and why. What can I drink? How long? Again, there's tons of different ideas on all of that. But back to what I opened with, if you look at creation, we are created, and God said, I give you all the herbs of the field, all the fruit, the vegetables, the tubulars, which, the yams, the sweet potatoes, normal potatoes, carrots, I give you all of this as fuel for you. The reason is the enzymes, the vitamins, the minerals, all this food had life-giving aspects to it. So here's the thing. You eat life-giving food. That life-giving food is deposited into your body. And then from that, it gives life, so to speak. Yes, we're still getting older. The body's still breaking down, but these things, can help you, lead a much more productive life versus processed foods that really is designed in a factory. There's nothing life-giving about it. That's why there's obesity. Type 2 diabetes is health related. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease based on our lifestyle. And so I think fasting, it can really help in a lot of areas as long as we don't get too carried away. And then 1,500 years later, after the fall or so, you remember Noah and all that is definitely substantiated. Many cultures around the world talk about a massive flood. And so God said, now I give you, in addition to all the life-giving food, and that's why the carnivore, and why it works is you get your body in a ketogenic state. You're burning fat. You possibly maybe getting rid of a lot of toxins because I don't know what you were eating before that. So yeah, if you switch, get rid of all this junk you're eating, switch to a clean meat-based diet, there's going to be some benefits for a while. But if you think of it long term, I just think long term, we're going to find at some point that it wasn't a good idea to do this long term. For most people. And so God said, I give you now, the beasts of the field as well as food. And it goes into clean, unclean, different things. And so we see the biblical model seems to be, whatever is God given in moderation, right? And so, you can get into dairy. What about clean dairy, raw dairy, where the enzymes and everything are still active and the good bacteria is still active versus pasteurizing, which kills all the good stuff? What kind of meat? To what you go to the local store, it says organic, is it really? And so, I wish I had the answer. I know for me, I try to just minimize meat and dairy. There have been times where I've eaten I don't know what the right word is, eaten or ate, quite a few of it. There we go. Eaten a large amount, throughout the week or something. I don't feel as great, but if I'm having just, plant-based, carbs only, beans, pasta, some healthy pasta or Ezekiel bread or rice or quinoa, man, I just feel kind of bloated and carbs don't, I'm probably borderline type 2 diabetes as well. If I were to just let myself go. So anyway, I hope that helps. He had some great points here. But I think overall, fasting is still very good and very healthy.